This is Donna Fine with More Than a Review, and you may recognize my guest. We have had Jeff several times, and thankfully he just keeps writing these Disney books for us so that we can keep reading. So Jeff's going to tell a little bit about himself in case you do happen to be new to his writing, and then we'll talk about the most recent book. So Jeff, kind of tell about yourself.
I am a Orlando native. I pastor a church, a great church in the Central Florida area, and I grew up in Orlando with a love of Disney and Walt Disney World, and so I got to grow up with that Disney vibe happening all around me. I had great memories of going there as a kid. Got to go there before the theme park even opened. Got to take a look around there, and from that point on, I was a 10-year-old wide-eyed kid. And so here we are 50 years later as we get ready to celebrate their 50th anniversary.
That's right.
And the memories are just, they're just jam-packed. And I've had the good fortune of raising a family, spending time out there at the resorts. And so Disney's been very much part of my life. And so with that background is kind of how I got into, if I was going to write, what do you write about? You write about things that you like and things that you know. And so that's kind of how the book series started 1,000 years ago, it seems. Back when we were still using chisels and putting into the stone at the time, I think. But
so tell us a little bit about Kingdom Chaos.
Kingdom Chaos is a fun mess, and meaning it ended up being a political thriller in, for anybody watching that understands, one of the most politically charged eras that I can remember in my lifetime, at least since the 70s. And so, and I wrote a book against that kind of backdrop that, it got an interesting review because it came out during the middle of the pandemic. And people read the book through whatever political lens they had. And I must admit, I guess I'm just naive still as a writer after all this time. Because, as a pastor, you deal with folks from all walks of life that come to your church, and you minister to them and you love them, and then you get along. And I was stunned when people brought to the book, and it's a fictional book about Disney, right? But they brought their political slant to it. Yeah. So they would read the characters either through a blue or a red lens, and then I would get these mail like, you are, and they would call me these names, and then, or we love what you wrote about this character, and I'm like, what are you guys reading the book I wrote? But again, it just reminded me that there's sometimes that even fiction speaks into a world of craziness with a kind of a desire to find balance. Yeah. And so what I did is I pitted the lead character, which is one that anybody who's read the series is familiar with, Grayson with a friend who comes from not a real estate background, as a former president has, but comes from a high-tech background, but a self-made billionaire, if you will, who ends up ascending to the presidency of the United States. And they're friends before he becomes president. Mm-hmm. But after he becomes president, there's a bit of a difference, a bit of a split. And, I love what you do, I don't like how you do it. Yeah. I love your policies, I don't like your approach. I like your style of getting things done, but I don't like the way you use a bully pulpit. And so there's a tension between what are longtime friends. Wow. I named the president Tyler Pride, which allowed all sorts of merchandising opportunities that disappeared during the pandemic. We could have put Pride in America again and wear red hats or whatever. But the story really was revolved around the fact that what if the president of the United States went missing at Walt Disney World, and his former best friend was the only guy that could find him because it's his theme park. Yeah. And all of the espionage that comes into the midst of that. And so I had some people saying, leave the president, no, we don't want to find him. And other ones are saying, we want to find him, and what's going to happen? So it has been a lot of fun. It has opened up the book to a whole different audience of political readers that aren't interesting a lot. And that's not good or bad. It's just where we are, I think, as a nation sometimes. So that's Kingdom Chaos. So it is chaotic and it's a mess, but it's a fun mess. And if you're a Disney fan, I think your readers will like it.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. And so I love the story that you tell about someone asking if Grayson would marry them.
Yeah.
And he's a fictional character.
He's a fictional character. I got a call one day. And I originally thought it was a prank because, there are people, I have friends who like to prank me, and then I like to prank them back. And they like the books because the books are just another way to kind of, dig in and see what mischief we can create. And I got a call where I was asked if Grayson Hawkes would perform their wedding at Disney World. and that was a message, and so, you know, you kind of call back skeptically, like, okay, what friend is this? What's your angle? What are you doing? It was a legitimate call. It was from a couple, live out of state, live in the Midwest, and they basically said, you know, we are big fans of your series. We have read all of the books, and I think at the time there were 3, 4 was on the way. And they said, we would love for you, for Grayson Hawkes, to do our wedding, but we realize he's not real. So could the creator of Grayson Hawkes do our wedding?
Wow.
And so I said, sure, why not? I said, we're coming to Florida on vacation. We'll come meet you. They came to the church. They met me. I met them out at the theme parks. And then they came back for their wedding. The wedding was at the Polynesian Resort. And so I got to work with the Disney wedding coordinators, and we kind of got immersed in this whole world of what does a Disney wedding look like. And I've done a few out there before. But this was a very different one because they really wanted Hawk to do the wedding, but he's not real. So I had to do I filled in for my fictional character. Never done that before.
I love that, though.
But we did that right on the beach. It was a beautiful wedding. Great couple, and they're doing really well. But I was just flattered they asked, you know.
Well, and I think it just speaks to your characters do come so alive to people. I mean, you know, that it was that important to them.
It was.
You know?
It really was. I'm always, I think I'm always honored and surprised and a little bit stunned at times by the intensity and passion that people will put into fictional characters. I used to think that's silly. Now I understand that, you know, if you do them well, and hopefully I don't know if I do them well. I do them the best I know how. But you create somebody that someone likes at some level, and to me, I mean, the characters are friends for me now. I mean, they're fictional friends, right? I mean, these are people I've kind of walked with for about 10 years, but you know, they take on a kind of a life of their own, and people see far more in them sometimes than you do, which is flattering that they care that much. I think this past year I got a drawing that a teenage young lady had made of how she saw Grayson Hawkes. Wow. And this was her anime drawing of what he would look like in an anime story. Which, again, the fact that she would do it and send it and take the time to reach out like that, I mean, I'm just very flattered by that. I mean, why, you know, I'm just a monkey pounding a rock somewhere. Why would anybody read the book? But they do, and I'm glad. I mean, I'm very fortunate. So.
Yeah. Wow. So tell us, what do you have coming?
There's a new book coming. It's called Kingdom Chaos. No, that's this book. I'm sorry, I'm lost. It's called Kingdom Virus. What else would we call it, right? And it takes place again in Walt Disney World with the same characters plus some new ones that people have come to kind of follow along. But in Kingdom Virus, we throw the kitchen sink at Grayson Hawkes and Company. And it's every virus in the world. I created for the story a brand new pandemic, and I know that's kind of morbid with all that's been going on, but I came up with my own pandemic. Why not? If it's fiction, you can do that. But also every type of viral problem that you could have in the world's largest vacation resort happens at the same time for a particular reason, and it is one of the wildest stories that I've ever had the opportunity to write. But I really did do what I was asked to do. I was asked to throw the kitchen sink at it, throw everything that I could against it, and see. The challenge was see how many things you can actually create that would go wrong that we can unravel when we get to the end and have some kind of meaning and message in the middle of it. And so that's been fun. And so I'm taking all these characters on another ride down. Down the lane to whatever mischief is out there. Hopefully it'll be out next year.
So that's a good point I wanted to say. When you're writing the book, it's definitely entertainment, like for sure. But do you also try to kind of weave a message in there? Yeah,
I do. I mean, Kingdom Chaos, very much underlying message was about the fact that we can disagree about a lot of things. But at the end of the day, if you're a follower of Christ, I mean, we're going to love each other. And we're going to care about each other, even if we disagree politically, and we've got to learn to do that. And so the underlying message is, you know, the love of Jesus and truth really is needed in a world where truth seems to be negotiable. And so that really was the theme, even though it was said and it was just a wild story, and the people, you know, kind of went crazy with it. And so every time there is a theme, there's an idea. And for Kingdom Virus, as it's coming down the line, what I'm finding is emerging as I write is the fact that, the world can unravel around you. But it's kind of like professional wrestling. While the end is predetermined, it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of work and fight to get to that end. And so to navigate what are pandemics and viruses and all the troubles that come along, God knows, and God knows what that ending is. But it doesn't mean that it's not going to be work to get there. And I think that sometimes we want, and I want, like everybody else, I want God, let's make this easy, right? Let me kick back and just relax through this ride. But, this past year and a half has been hard on a lot of people. And I've been blessed through it. Hopefully most of your audience has been blessed through it. But it really has. People have taken a lot of nicks. They've lost loved ones. And we've had to come to grips with how do you navigate a different world. And that's terrifying to some. But if you're a follower, it doesn't need to be terrifying. God's not surprised. And so there's hope. And so hopefully that will emerge from the book in the midst of the Disney madness. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I love that. There are many times I've had to say this was not a surprise to God.
No,
He knew this was
no.
happening.
It's been a heartbreaking year.
Yeah.
And they've had to climb hills and face things that I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I know I had my hands full like everybody else, but at the end of the day, we're still upright, we're still standing, God's still in charge, and I'm here at a book event. I'm selling books, so this is it's not a bad year after all. So
this is my first one since the pandemic, so I was thrilled to be here. One more question I would ask is how hard is it to weave in the true stuff about Disney into your fictional?
Sometimes it's a stretch, but I always lean back into what I know about Walt Disney as a historical figure. Certainly flawed. I'm not one of those guys that looks through rose-colored glasses and believes the guy I saw on TV as a kid on Sunday nights. That persona was the real guy. But what Walt Disney was historically was he was an innovator. He was creative. He was a guy who knew how to chase dreams and was not afraid to risk everything to get there. And contrary to a lot of that hype that's out there about how it was all money driven and stuff like that, that's really not fair, because Disney went bankrupt twice and mortgaged everything he had on the next project and carried with him those animators and people that helped create it. And I think that sometimes we lose that in the success of his life, especially maybe some of those later years. And so for me, I'm reminded that this is a guy who, if you think about it, think about one person whose life has shaped culture. He changed what is a theme park industry. He moved it from an amusement park to a theme park. Yeah. He changed animation, breakthrough filmmaker. Technicolor doesn't exist if it's not for Walt Disney. He shot his films in color when they could only show them in black and white.
Yeah.
Because he knew one day it would be worth it. I think that innovator side of him we lose, and I think for me, that's always been important, because I've always believed that the people who follow Jesus need to be at the front end of culture, and we need to be the ones that are shaping it and making change, not catching up like you seem to do sometimes. But we need to be at the front end of it. Walt Disney was that guy, and so when I would read about his life and some of the things that he did, and I can remember that, then those historical moments to me have a lot more meaning and they're a lot more fun, because you think this is a guy who's kind of making it up as he goes, but by the same time he has the ability to keep landing in the future. He gets it right. And even when he failed, it was never the end of it was just like, I've learned something new, and I'll be okay tomorrow. And and I think in the world that we live in sometimes, that we don't fight for things like that anymore. We want things to be too easy. We want that instant gratification. He was not an overnight success story. He was a guy that ruined his life, it seemed like, a number of times before he ever hit it big. And about the time he hit it big, he died.
Wow. And
it was over. And so, and the tragic end of that is you're laying in a hospital room looking at the ceiling tiles, mapping out Epcot, that you're never going to get to see. You think, this is a guy that he just left too soon. but yet the impact is still felt to this day. And so that's, if we could have half of that kind of impact, wouldn't it be awesome?
Yeah.
And so for me, when I reach back into the history, I always pull that out.
Yeah.
And I say, this is a big story. This is important. And so now what can I do with it that's going to make the reader kind of connect with a brand new story?
But I think that's too what makes it so fascinating is you are able to find those real things that happen and then throw that fiction around them, and it just captures people.
And you know, and it's funny too, because I mean, there's always something. I mean, we're recording this in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And so yesterday, in a little block of free time, I end up going downtown to the theater district, where there's an outdoor theater there that Walt and Lillian visited in 1963. He took a tour when they were talking about building a theme park in St. Louis, and that theme park never happened. But they visited around there, so they showed them around. Walt went down and went backstage at this theater and discovered it had something. It was a revolving theater where there were sets that could be permanently put up. Well, this is 1963. In 1965, the Carousel of Progress shows up, and Walt makes a comment before he leaves. I like that stage. I like what you've done with that stage with the revolving scenes. That's an idea worth keeping. He made that statement here in St. Louis.
I'll read and learn.
2 years before the Carousel of Progress comes out.
Oh my goodness.
Now, so you try to connect to stories like that. So I had the opportunity yesterday to walk in there and kind of walk into that theater thinking, wow. And it's an outdoor kind of an amphitheater kind of thing. Yeah. And think, man, this is pretty cool and pretty historical.
It is.
And so for me, again, you know, great fun to do that. And there's a lot of things like that out there.
Yeah.
And we forget, you know, that these things just didn't happen, and they just don't happen by accident. You've got a guy that was really going out looking for those kind of things, which again makes it more meaningful.
But he even, when he sees them, he thinks, how can I use that?
Oh yeah, everything he saw was an idea.
Yeah.
And so that makes it a lot easier to find the history on him too.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We are thrilled that Grayson continues.
He does. He's still with us, so it's good.
Thank you so much. All right, we will have links on how to get to the books in the blog post. Thank you.